And hi, everybody. Welcome to Mormonish. I'm Rebecca, and there is a question on this episode. He was not able to make it, but we have the incredible Kendel Christensen. You can be my co-host today and presenter, a double duty. How are you today, Kendel?
Oh, I love being on this. This is some life-changing stuff. I'm so excited. This will be great.
Yeah, this is going to be great. Now, a while ago, too long ago, actually, we did an episode with Kendel on boundaries, and we called it part one. And we've been trying to connect. Kendel has been very busy. He has been on all kinds of different podcasts, working on his own projects. So we were finally able to find a time so that he can come back and we can do part two, because this is a expansive topic and, growing every day and so important, especially to the post-Mormon community, I think. So, and we had a huge positive response to your first episode. I'm sure you know that, Kendel, but I had so many people email me or text me or message me and say that I needed that. That information was incredible. More Kendel, like more cowbell, right? They were saying more Kendel, basically. So we're really excited that you're back for part two.
Yeah, happy to be here. And yeah, this is a whole series. I have so many presentations along these lines. I call it my Get to Reality series. So we can
Like that.
deconstruct, but how do we rebuild healthy things? That's what I'm involved in right now. And that's what my whole website and YouTube channel, Learned Empowerment, is about.
Yep. And we'll put links to all that in the show notes because it is really important. And you bring up such a good point. People deconstruct and then they're there going, but what now? I think the hardest part is to kind of climb and claw your way back to, just more of a healthy existence after having gone through all of that. So you're definitely a part in helping all of us know what we need to do. And I love how you mentioned so many good books and you bring up so many great resources, that there's something for everybody because people recover in different ways using different kinds of resources. And you're great. You're like a one-stop shop of helping people get to a healthy place.
That's my goal.
So
All
I think
right, so yeah, let's launch into it. I'll put
let's
my
launch
slides up
in.
here. But yeah, unfortunately, we're going to start with a kind of hard video with
Yeah.
Elder Holland. So we'll just play the video, and then I want your thoughts on what Elder Holland's statement and actions, how they relate to boundaries. So here it is,
Okay, we're ready.
and I think it's at the right point.
Don't you ever go home. Don't you dare leave this place. Not for God's sake, not for the church's sake, not for President Hinckley's sake. Somehow, I think they can probably handle it. But don't you dare leave here for your sake. I have lived on and off in my general authority life. I have come in contact around the world with missionaries who did not see their mission through. I'm not talking about medical releases or emergencies or tragedies. I'm talking about somebody who just said, I don't like doing this, it's too hard, and I'm going home and let my mother take care of me. I have met those people around the world, and if there is a more sorrowful, if there is a more anguished, and in a sense, if you promise not to misunderstand me, if there is, in a sense, a more pitiable group in all the world, I do not know who it is. Now that's strong language. That's really strong language. But I told you before, my mission means everything to me. I would wrestle you to the floor. I'd pull the curtains down. I'd get chains. I don't know, is there something around here that we tie people with? I don't see anything to tie people with. I'd rip the cords off the television camera to keep you here. Not for our sake, not for, you think one little missionary and 58,000, that isn't gonna bring the church to its knees, but it's gonna ruin your life. If you don't do the best.
Okay, we can stop there. Sorry about the
Please stop there.
audio. But just that ending note of like if you do this, it will ruin your life. But sorry, what are your thoughts first?
No, I mean, you kind of sprung this on me that you were going to play this. I have such an extreme distaste for this clip that I've been forced to watch on various podcasts and comment on. I can't even express my just disgust over this clip, because the thing I know is that he's talking to a very vulnerable audience of missionaries. And they're there. It's in the MTC, right? That he's addressing them? Or, yeah, they're there. They've already been there a little while. They're already broken down. I mean, I talk about my co-host Landon going into the MTC as just a regular guy. Within 2 days in his mission journal, he's writing, I feel so guilty. I'm nothing. I'm no one. You know, within days, the tactics start to break these boys down. And here you have an authority, you know, someone that they see as someone who will be the prophet. He's an apostle, and he just gets in there. And, you know, my mission means everything to me. Okay, great. That's great for you. But don't use these tactics on these boys, and to call them a pitiable group, and to imply that if anyone leaves, it's because you just need your mom to take care of you. I mean, I could go on, and I won't, but he pulled out every tactic that you use to manipulate, even the threat of violence, right? He's trying to be funny, but he's known for this, right? The musket, all kinds of, where he talks with this violent rhetoric that is this underpinning of Mormonism. If you really pay attention, I want to strangle you and wrap you in a curtain and knock you down and wrestle you. I'm sure they were kind of laughing uncomfortably, but the message is there. You know, you're staying, you're trapped. Any thoughts that you have that you want to leave, you know, you're deficient. It's your fault. You're unfaithful, right? Like Landon wrote in his journal. And it's just the worst of the worst. You know, who treats people like that? Well, unfortunately, we know a lot of people in the church that use these kind of tactics, so a lot more subtly. I would say this is pretty overt, which is why I think I have such a strong reaction to it. But yeah, this is absolutely the worst when you consider the vulnerable young audience that he's talking to.
Yeah, and that's what I want to emphasize is maybe in your life people won't be this overt, but anytime someone is pressuring you, is trying to limit your options, or saying, you know, one of the options that is absolutely valid and worthy of consideration has all this pressure and weight and consequences attached to it, that is very unhealthy boundaries, and you need to really reconsider your relationship with that person or organization. And you're right. This organization, in my view, does this a lot: manipulation, pressuring, limiting your options, saying that very valid options carry heavy consequences so as to dissuade you from choosing it. It's incredibly toxic, and we're going to step out of that.
Now, I wonder what President Holland thinks of this trend where supposedly sports stars, right, who are going to BYU, who are LDS, are able to say, yeah, I feel like a year works for me, you know, and everybody seems fine, right? It's a different day. Is President Holland going to wrestle, say, Ryder Lyons to the ground for serving a 1-year mission? I don't know.
Yeah, I hope they give people more options,
I
because
hope so too.
like I was telling you before in the show, like my mission in the beginning was super hard on me.
Mm-hmm.
I had some mental health issues. I stuck it out, but man, I wish I had more options. Like
Mm-hmm.
1 year would have been perfect for me.
Yep.
Like that would have been like, okay, check it off. I don't get shunned by my community,
Yep.
and I fulfilled my commitment fully, but 2 years, wow, that is so big for so many people.
Yeah. No, I hope that comes out of this, you know, sports angle, that everyone realizes, you know what, I have options too. I may not be a 5-star quarterback, but I do have options and I have other goals, and let's work this in. So, and that's a boundary, right? Basically saying, look, I'm willing to serve and do this, but for me, this works and this doesn't. So, but again, we're not great at boundaries, are we?
Yep, and that's in my communication series. One of the most healthy tactics is to say, well, I'm not going to say yes to what you're asking, but I will do this alternative that's less or different, or something that, you know, resonates with me or is, you know, more fit to my schedule. So I want to, you know, help to
Mm-hmm.
this extent. To this extent, I will help, but any more is crossing a boundary, and I need you to respect that. It's just a whole new mindset and a better way to live. Okay, so let's review a little bit what boundaries are not. It's not a way to control others. It's not a means to get your way all the time. It's not an excuse to not care. It's not a way to continue behavior that is maladaptive, unreasonable, or toxic. Even in a culture like Mormonism and sometimes ex-Mormonism that, you know, puts on a happy face or a mask. It's not a way to avoid confronting bad behavior that benefits you, like avoiding uncomfortable things, saying like, "Oh, I don't want to confront that. So I'm just going to say that's a boundary and you have to respect it. It's not that. But they are a means to create and protect a mutually safe and satisfying shared spaces. We have a whole visual for that today at the end of the presentation, how to think about boundaries visually. And it is, at the end of the day, it's protecting your safe space. It's protecting the things that are important to you while allowing that for others at the same time. And unfortunately, it does require responsibility, and for people pleasers like me, discomfort and growth.
Yep. I would say for a people pleaser, which I am, and you're saying you are too, it requires actual bravery. I mean, honestly, to just, and I feel like I finally got to a point where I could, say and do things like seriously 5 decades and more into my life. Maybe I just became a grumpy old lady, but I finally am kind of just able to say, I don't think so. And I've done so many things in my life, so uncomfortable in the church, things I never wanted to do, never wanted to be a part of, just because I didn't know how to say no. And so I think it takes real bravery for people to be able to do it. So
it really does. And I want to reframe what you just said, a la our conversations with Mark Manson and his research and his book. He says that one of the hallmarks of a mature person is allowing their actions to displease others sometimes. Yes. Like an immature person never wants to do that. They never want to, say no or have someone be upset at them. But a mature, enlightened person is totally okay with that. They know that's part of life. They know they got to disappoint people sometimes. That is part and parcel to life and living it. If you live it for other people, I would argue, and he would argue, you're not really living it. So you're not a grumpy old woman. You're becoming an assertive
old woman
that is, starting to finally,
right.
Displease and say no to others sometimes. But their reaction, in my opinion, for most people, has very little correlation to the reasonableness of your decisions. Yeah. But again, I come from a biased sample where like really people around me expect to get their way almost all the time. They don't really place a high priority on what Kendel wants. That was the number one transition when I left the church, lost my testimony, was all of a sudden I could say, hey, what does Kendel want? And make decisions based on that. And it wasn't always, the thing that pleased others all the time. And it was hard, but it was definitely better. Okay, so just the definition again, really quick. Boundaries are the rules or limits a person creates to maintain what is reasonable, safe, and permissible behavior, and how that person, the person setting the boundaries, will respond when someone steps outside of those. The number one misconception I encounter on this topic when people first learn boundaries is they think, oh, this is something I can force on others to do what I want. If I don't like this, I can say, hey, that's a boundary. You have to do X, Y, Z. That is not at all what a boundary is. A boundary is, hey, under these circumstances, I'm going to respond this way. If this situation occurs or if this behavior happens, this is what I'm going to do in response to that. You can set all the boundaries in the world and it does not affect others and their reactions and their responses. That's up to them. Boundaries are completely what you are doing in your life. Okay, so, and it really should be for both people. Boundaries are the distance at which I can love you and me at the same time. It's the rules of your yard, and it's what you need to be your best self to show up for others in the best, most healthy way possible. Okay, I honestly can't remember what I mentioned I would go over in this presentation, but here's what we got. The four types of boundaries.
There are no boundaries, yeah. Kendel.
Oh, good. But if we need to set some, I'm totally willing to have that conversation. But I think this is important. So we've already kind of talked about the most common one, in my view, for most members and former members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. So the first type is the doormat. So characteristics of the doormat is they don't usually love themselves that much. They have a lot of feelings of low worth, and that translates easily into like, oh, well, this person is more important than me, or I got to do XYZ to keep them happy because just for whatever reason, consciously or unconsciously, you place yourself lower in the totem pole. We're
Mhm.
social creatures, and that's a characteristic of doormats, is they just in the hierarchy of importance of people in their life and in their community, they put themselves lower than others. So that translates into giving others more of what they want.
Well, and in the church, there's a very established hierarchy. So, there are people in your ward in higher positions, more important than you. Of course, as you go up the chain, there are people that you must defer to. My parents were an example of just complete hero worship of, the brethren. The brethren were always held up as, oh, do as the brethren say. They definitely put themselves on a lower spiritual plane, a lower every kind of a plane, and the brethren could do no wrong.
Oh
So
yeah, you
that
walk
also
into my
translated,
house and what's
yeah,
one of the first things you see? A picture of the first
exactly.
presidency,
Yeah, yeah.
high on the mantle.
Yeah, and even lower leadership, like even after I'd left home, my mom would text me, "Oh, I went to a function. There were three former bishops there. There were two stake presidents that, it was just sort of this, you definitely bought into that hierarchy and the hero worship."
Oh gosh, oh gosh. Okay, so this is a huge tangent. Don't let me go too far on this, but in talking about our worth, where does our worth come from? In Mormonism, I think your calling
Yeah,
is in the top few things. Like
100%.
how often we'll just say people in my family, people I'm related to would say, "Oh, so and so just moved in. They're a former bishop, or they were
Mhm.
a stake president, or they were a mission president." Like that would be always one of the first things
Yep.
this person would mention when meeting a new relationship was their church calling history. And as a child, I that translated into like, "Oh, I gotta have really important callings to be loved and be
Yep.
important in this family member's eyes." Like that's really what it was saying in a lot of ways.
Yep, or even in the community. And I don't think we talk enough about the impact that has on men. My spouse never had a high calling because he was kind of more of a life of the party kind of a person. He would DJ the word parties, right? He's not going to be on the high council. But because he was raised that way, it was a lot of angst for him that others were rising, others were getting, even though he would have been miserable having those kind of callings because that was not his personality. And then as a woman, if your spouse is not rising through the ranks, and you go to a lunch and everyone's like, "Oh God, he was just called into the bishopric again," and you're like, "Oh, well, we're DJing the word party." There's
Yeah,
a hierarchy, and you slip, you fall socially. It exists. It really does.
it really does. And in my presentation about high demand groups and religions, for the people who that is their personality, I mean, it becomes a real source of
Mm-hmm.
pain in their
Yep.
life. Like
Yep.
it literally to some extent becomes active torture. Like take me for example. I wanted to be an institute teacher. That was my dream
Oh,
job.
that's
I did
right.
all these things in my life for that, and I was able to do it for a couple years. But to be hired full time, there was these extra things that I just were outside my control. In my Mormon story, I'll go into detail about how that affected my marriage and things like that. But another family member, it was their personality, like to be the obedient, leader person that wanted to organize and make things happen in the church, very, eager to please and obedient his whole life, never in a bishopric, never in a high status calling. And that really made him depressed, like,
Yep.
what am I doing wrong? Am I not righteous? There's all these promises for the righteous, but I've never had an important calling. How that affected his mental health. It's really quite tragic as far as the extent to which this is ingrained in people as far as oh, I must there must be something wrong with me.
Yep. Especially when your patriarchal blessing tells you that you'll rise to the heights and then you don't. And I think when you step away, you realize, wow, it's a lot of times just a popularity contest or who you live next door to or who knows you. It's certainly not, somebody's going to be plucked out of a small town and made an apostle, even though they're the most righteous, awesome gospel, good doctrine teacher you've ever had. That's not going to happen. There's a
Yeah.
hierarchy, there's, a royalty almost, and that's where you're going to get those people from.
Yep, and especially when you get into things again, sorry about the other tangent, but I literally didn't know this was a thing until after I had lost my testimony and stopped attending regularly. But the second anointing,
Yeah.
and that's a
Oh,
real thing that
yeah.
happens to people. It's an
Yep.
ordinance, and they have, unofficial, I guess, criteria where they kind of choose people who are more wealthy, who are more
Mhm.
socially connected, and that's the process. It has nothing to do with, your individual righteousness per se, because these people that are not wealthy would, have a higher percentage of getting this ordinance from the church. But statistically, my understanding is they don't.
No, I mean, and it is who you know. We had a guest on once, I won't name names, but their mother was the daughter of a prophet. And for her wedding present, and they would have been a young couple, they received the second anointing.
Wow.
Yeah, I know. It's who you know. Yeah. And once
It,
you
it, it
realize
yeah.
that, yeah. And again, we've also heard from episodes, I think on Mormon Stories about the second anointing. They literally ask people who receive it, do you know anybody kind of like you know what I mean, who'd benefit from this? And that's what you're talking about, the same kind of, socially mobile, upward, affluent, yeah, a regular person, a regular Joe who holds down two callings and is the most faithful, awesome person that you know is never going to get that.
Not gonna get even on the radar.
Nope.
Yeah, when
Nope.
I go through Stephen Hassan's research, all these indirect directives, they give all the pieces to say something, but they never really say it because, it's all in code and they want to CYA. It's so manipulative. It's so
Yeah.
crazy now looking back on it. But when you're swimming in it, you don't maybe see it. You're like, oh yeah, I am that special person. And then yeah, this exclusive club, this top tier in the top tier in the
Yeah.
organization, yeah, I totally belong there. And it's the
Yeah.
right thing to
And I
do. And you
can
don't
get
you
there.
don't look at all the other factors of like, oh, maybe it is because I'm related to this general authority.
Yeah.
Like, you discount that, and it messes with their psychology too, not just the people that don't get chosen, the people that get chosen have some issues with elitism and superiority complexes and stuff. It's bad up and down, in my opinion.
Yep.
Okay, so other things about the doormat. A part of them, like their personality, is at home being disrespected. It's normal and it feels right, and to do otherwise, like you and I were saying at the beginning, is very uncomfortable and requires a lot of courage. And so a lot of people, by virtue of that high cost, we'll never do it. It's just easier to be like, oh, okay, we'll have it your
Mm-hmm.
way. That's fine. I don't want to cause drama. I don't want to rock the
Mm-hmm.
boat. Um, they equate love and being loved with saying yes. Like to say no, they've been conditioned. I have definitely been conditioned to say no means I don't love you or you don't matter or, there's something wrong with you. And that is completely unhealthy boundaries, but is absolutely the message that they've gotten over their lives. Even if the only way that's been transmitted is how people in their life react when they say a reasonable no. Like if there's a high reaction, they're like, "Oh, I don't want them to
Yeah.
react that way, so I'll just give them what they want because it's easier."
Well, and I do feel this is a boundary that even faithful LDS are starting to recognize because I do see people on faithful Reddit and stuff like that talk about, oh, I turned down a calling or I said I couldn't just because of my family. They usually use the example of the family, but to be able to say no to something that just doesn't work, that's really important. And I also notice when I have friends that are like maybe struggling or deconstructing, but they're still in the church, the first thing they say is, I've decided not to accept any new callings. That's kind of one of the first things that they do. I'm not going to say yes, just blanket anymore. And then they also say, I'm not going to pay tithing right now until I figure it out. So I think that's one of the things the same, because we are trained to say yes. In my day, it was like, you always say yes to a calling. You would never say no, regardless of how difficult it is or how it didn't work out for you and your family. But I do see people exercising that right now. And I just think that's because they're tapped and strapped and overwhelmed and fewer people in the wards and they're asking too much and families are taking priority. So I'm happy about that at least that people are starting to say, you know what, I'm saying no for now.
Yeah, I've seen that too. In my interactions, it's mostly with people who are already questioning, but I'll
Mm-hmm.
take your word for it that people who
Yeah.
are true believers are starting to do it. That really is encouraging
Mm-hmm.
and makes me happy. But yeah, I got that talk multiple times that not only should you always say yes, like that is the only option, but that is tied to your worthiness. Like if you
Hmm.
ever even consider turning down a calling, like that's a
Yeah.
reflection and something that will come up at judgment day type
I,
severity of like, you didn't have the faith or the commitment to follow God's plan for you type stuff.
I can't even, if I go back through my history, the things I said yes to when I was in college, I was the ward librarian, of course, because I was in library school. And they go, so what that means is that every Saturday, you need to go over to the Stake Library, which was on BYU campus, and you'll be manning that from 9 until noon in case people come by, need to pick up materials. A college student, early 20s, having their Saturday morning, every Saturday morning, sitting in a library where no one ever showed up. And I did it. I did not say no. I mean, and I'm sure people in the comments, people watching have examples like that. We're looking back, you're just like, are you kidding? That's insanity. And I will tell you, the first time I ever said no that I can remember, I didn't have kids yet, but I had leg surgery, and I was a visiting teacher. I was in a family ward, and I'd had surgery on my leg. And they called me and they said, okay, the lady that you visit teach, her house is a complete wreck. We tried to send the Merry Maids over there, but they looked at it and said it was biohazard and they would not take on the job. They said, will you go over and clean it? And I said, well, I actually just had surgery and I'm supposed to kind of, keep things sanitary and stay off it. And they're like, are you sure? Because we really need someone to go over and clean it. And, just to kind of, yeah. And I said, my parents are here caring for me, helping me, because I've had my surgery. So I'm just going to have to say no. And then they said, do you think your parents could go over and clean this woman's house? I am not kidding. Talk about a boundary. So yeah, I'm sure people have worse stories than that, but until something is so extreme, you don't realize the little things step by step that you've said yes to that make you just a yes person, right? You do not say no until you have to make kind of a big gesture and say that's not going to work.
Oh yeah, and there's so many psychological things at play. Like
Exactly.
I remember like this picture of a doormat. Like there are some boundaries around their person. Like there is some extreme
Mm-hmm.
where they might say
No.
no, but like look at the gaps in
Yeah.
that picture. Like they're significant. And one of the things that unfortunately worked, or at least worked in my case, was that very thing. Is like people would say, "Well, you said yes last time, or you said
Uh-huh.
yes to this request. Why not this request?"
Yep.
Like I mean, it's like it's really hard to put the genie back in the bottle once you've become this person who says yes all the time. In fact, in working with my therapist, that's one of the things that like I really regret is like I've had dreams of like standing up in priesthood meeting and saying no to
Yeah.
some requests because I just never did. I always
Yeah.
said yes, and I never had that experience of taking my power and being like, I have a decision to make. Like I have the option to say no. And I know it may sound silly, but to me that's a
No.
big deal
Yeah.
that I
No, it sounds like
wish I
we're
would have
very
done that.
much alike, honestly. We really do. And I think there was a opinion piece in the Salt Lake Tribune just recently where somebody said it was, yeah, I think it was Gordon Munson even. It was an opinion piece about how service can literally take your life. And he told the story of a woman that was like this, saying yes and yes and yes. And she got all of her personal satisfaction from saying yes. She had some medical conditions that she needed to slow down and stop and go see some doctors, have some treatment, go to some specialists. She never could find time. And when you find somebody like that in your ward, of course people then, I don't want to say take advantage, but they know that person will always do it, and so they're always going to ask. And this person, it literally, this is extreme, but it killed her. She never did go to get her medical scenario taken care of just because of constant service without self-care.
Yep, and that leads right into the next characteristics. They are
Mhm.
not in tune
Yeah.
with their needs.
Yep.
That saying yes and being, always serving others and doing yes to church callings and activities and stuff, that's their main identity.
Yeah.
And they're enmeshed. They're not differentiated. Like I know you've and other programs recently have said, these moms that get married early, they have kids, and then they're in their 30s and 40s, and they do not know who they are because their whole life has been about others and service and raising kids, and they haven't had the luxury or time to know their own needs. Like they don't even know what kind of pizza topping they prefer because it's always been about others. Oh,
That is
my
so
heart,
true.
my heart just breaks.
I was at Costco the other day and I'm like, it's so weird to shop without kids at home because I used to know, I get the pizza rolls and I get the this and that, and I'm not getting any of those now. So what do I do? But I think a lot of, especially women in the church, as they get older and their families are raised, they tend to feel invisible, and I think that is because if you haven't really developed a sense of self, you do wonder, who am I? What am I? And you do feel invisible. So it's very interesting.
Yep. So again, we've already said it, but just cultivate the habit of saying, what do I like? What makes me feel good? What do I want in any situation? What do I want in this situation? What do I want in this situation? Why? Like, get to know yourself and what makes you happy. Those things, seek after. Don't feel bad for saying yes to those things. Say yes to those things more. Don't totally push others to the side, but I'm here to tell you, this is a process and it's something you need to cultivate if you've been like Rebecca and I, just saying yes and making it about others so much. Like, you gotta stop and retrace your steps and get to know yourself and put yourself in your life. This is your life.
I love that. Put
Um,
yourself in your life. It reminds me of a time, remember when vision boards were a big thing? You would actually print out pictures and put them on the board and everything. And I was in some scenario with family, I think, where we were making vision boards. And everybody looked at mine and they're like, everything on this is for someone else. Oh, I hope my son does this. And I hope that they were right. Everything on the vision board, there was nothing for me. Like, I hope that someday I can start a podcast, right? No, it was all about everything for everyone else. And of course, parents have hopes and dreams for their kids and everything, but no, there was nothing just for me. So that was very revealing that, yeah, I was the ultimate yes person. I never really thought about myself.
Yeah, and I know we can have a whole conversation about how the church affects men, but I have to say that for women, I think it's especially bad. I will never forget. I think I was 14 or 15. It was a seminary lesson, and we were creating vision boards. That was the goal of the lesson, which was good. I love how the church teaches goal setting and, consistently working towards stuff. But Rebecca, I kid you not, this is totally true. He gave an example of a vision board, and for a boy, I can't remember if it was a specific boy or not, but it was like, serve a mission, earn this much money
Mhm.
before a mission to pay for your mission. Like, there was all these specific things. And at the end he was like, become a general authority, maybe become
Exactly.
a prophet. Like, that was on the vision board. He wrote it down. And when it got to the example of a girl in the class or just a generic girl, like, there were very few specifics. It was general stuff, prepare to be married.
Right.
And like the,
Motherhood.
the the last thing on the list was maybe become the mother to a prophet. Like, that was
Oh
the
my
ultimate
gosh.
goal. It
Ah,
was like
yeah.
it was all about others. It wasn't about herself. It was
Yeah.
about others. And the best thing that she could hope for was just giving birth to someone else. Like, I can't even believe
Yeah. I think
how
parents
that
are
is.
seeing that more and more, especially with daughters, and going, I don't really want my child in this kind of a system, a girl, where she's so limited. I think they're starting to see it.
Yeah, yeah, I hope so, because man, my heart just breaks the messages that they're
Yeah.
being sent about their worth and their place in this organization. So yes, men and women, so they're brown nosers. Yeah, they want to please others. Um, the people pleaser is a little bit better. Again, if you see the boundary picture, there's more limits
Hmm.
set, but it's still pretty loose or porous. So people pleasers live with a lot of anxiety. They're always concerned with how others are viewing them. If you read Anatomy of Peace and the Arbinger Institute stuff, their term for this is they live in the need to be seen as box. They need to be seen as good. They need to be seen as, in positive light all the time. So in order to be seen positively, you say yes a lot. It's not quite as bad as the doormat, but it's still extremely bad. They would never speak to their friends the way they speak to themselves. They're always hard on themselves, and therefore they feel overwhelmed, usually carrying a lot of resentment, which they often deny. Um,
I think
They
that translates itself into what would the people in the ward think, or what would the neighbors think? I was raised with that to the extreme. It was always everyone's watching you. You need to be an example. What will they think if you do this? So you get this sense where you think about what everybody else thinks before anything about what you might think. But I think that's cultural.
Yep, and
I
again,
was raised with that.
psychologically, you are substituting someone else for your internal moral compass.
Mm-hmm.
You're substituting
Yeah.
decision making to another group. Like that's why to me this is so toxic. I'm so glad you brought that up. They only speak up when the poor treatment is pretty extreme. Um, like the word no catches in their throat. It's so hard. They consistently put themselves above others. They make assumptions and project all the time, like the label peacemaker. I kid you not. This happens quite often in Mormon spaces. I still have majority active member friends, and I travel sometimes, especially to see my son, and when I stay in someone's house, for example, like again, this is not uncommon. This is pretty common where like I'll arrive and they'll say like, "Oh, we did this and this and this, and like don't worry about this. If this ever happens, we'll do this." And like all these things that they're just anticipating my needs before like they ask me what I'm okay or not okay with.
Right.
And we'll have this conversation where it's like, "Well, okay, that's great that you've done all this, but like I really only need this and like what can I do for you?" Or like,
Yeah.
this and this that you did, like that's really not a bother for me, so you don't have to worry about it. And they're worried like, "Well, are you just saying that so that we won't worry? Because we're not worried." And like it goes back and forth like that. I kid you not. This has happened multiple times where like they put on themselves the responsibility for your comfort
Yeah.
and feelings in every situation. And when you say like, "Hey, let's do this shared," like if something I need, I'll speak up. Like, are you okay with that?
Right.
And they're kind of not. They want to anticipate everything. So it's this like
That's why
toxic
they say
cycle.
Mormons are the nicest people, the nicest neighbors ever. But then if you don't kind of go along with what maybe they prepared for you or the way that they think it should go, then there can be that other side to it, where they're inordinately upset or offended if it doesn't work out. So that's interesting.
Yes, secret resentment is a
Yes,
hallmark
that's it.
of
That's it.
these people. Yep.
Yep. That's it.
We already talked about that one. They struggle to say no,
Mhm.
disappointing. We've already talked about that. They give up a lot of power and identity to others. We talked about externalizing decision
Oh my
making.
goodness.
All my decisions are based off what others will think. You explained that perfectly.
Well, and the power structure in the church, you do have to give up power, but it's so frustrating. I remember when my dad passed away a year ago, and he was in a care center, and so there was a question of where the funeral would be. Would it be held in another building, in his branch, in a sister's branch, all that, and all they could talk about is getting the authority and okay from different people as to where my own dad's funeral could be held. Well, we have to check with him. Will the stake president give us permission for this to happen? Will we check with the bishop? Will he give us the green light to be able to do it? It was just like, are you serious? That these other people are so heavily involved in where we will have it and what we might do. And my mom kept saying, I hope that's okay. Do we have the authority? Have we gotten the authority? She just kept saying that because that's how she was raised, even more to the extreme, being someone in her 80s. But it really hit home to me that even at the end of life, you still are under someone else's authority, and you give them authority instead of saying, I'm going to do this. It's really okay.
Yeah, and it's so extreme that it can go to your thoughts. I mean, we have
Yeah.
scriptures of like watch
Yeah.
your thoughts and your
Yeah.
words, like everything. I think I mentioned on last episode how this was so extreme to me that I would not feel comfortable having an opinion or taking a position on any topic unless I had a general authority or prophetic or quote from a manual of the church to back it up. Like
Yeah.
if there wasn't something said on the topic, I'd be like, what's right, what's wrong? Like I don't want to offend God here. And so I made a 3,000 page journal organizing all these quotes from General Conference by topic to that end so that I would have the confidence to be like, okay, the majority seem to take this position, so that's my position. I would never think of saying, well, what do I think on this topic? Like what resonates with me? What do I think is right? What do I think is
Right.
wrong? Absolutely foreign to me.
I'm so sorry, Kendall. I picture you like at an ice cream shop and they go, "Do you want vanilla or chocolate?" You're like, just a minute, just a minute. You're thumbing through. Oh, here's an example where President Uchtdorf chose vanilla over chocolate. I'll have vanilla. I mean, of
It's
course,
so
that's a
funny you mention
facetious
that
example,
because
but
that is absolutely like pretty close to what I was. But as an institute teacher, I was always researching and gathering new quotes. And finally, I can show you. I can pull up my journal right now and show you. There is a quote. There is a specific quote by Elder Oaks that said, "If you're at the grocery store, God doesn't care about things like brand of pineapple." And after that, it was like, oh, okay,
oh,
all
I
this
can
whole
shop.
category of
Yeah.
decisions, I can now just be like, okay. God won't condemn me either way, so I
Wow.
don't have to worry. And it was a significant, burden lifted, like as sad as that sounds, but it's
Yeah, well,
true.
and that's scrupulosity too, and the church breeds that, where you're hyper religious and you have I know I had a roommate who would pray before, should I go to class today? Should I set foot out of the door? Should I? It just became extreme. I didn't, of course, at the time recognize, OCD or scrupulosity, but they were just completely blocked from doing anything, even taking a step out the door without checking with the Lord or making sure the Holy Ghost had let her know it was okay to do this. And
Yeah, and the sad thing, in my opinion, is I think the church loves these type of people.
yeah,
Like they love it when they're hesitant to do anything until the
right.
prophet or the
Yeah.
church or a church leader gives the go ahead. Like they breed that. They I mean, what is the first law of heaven? Obedience.
Yeah. Oh, yes. No, and they really stress that. I remember being at a state conference when I think I did have little kids and we dragged them to state conference and whoever was presiding, this was in what's now the Provo Temple. It used to be a tabernacle. And he said, "I need a volunteer from the audience." So we're all like, "Oh, this is interesting. When do you do that at state conference?" And this big guy called on this big guy. He gets up there and the state president goes, "I want you to do as I do." And he goes, "Obedience brings forth blessings." And he raised his hands and lowered his hands. And he's getting this guy to do it. "Obedience brings forth blessings." I will never forget. And then everybody in the audience started chanting it. "Obedience bring." And I'm just like, "Oh, come on. Can you guys all not see this?" I mean, at that point, of course, I've been PMO for forever, but I was just like, this is so disturbing. Even the guy up front looked uncomfortable doing it, but they were trying to hammer that home. They created a chant and we did it.
Yep, and this is also in my presentation about high control groups, but it goes to such an extreme where they want, and if you will allow it, they will control almost every minute of your day, and
Mm-hmm.
and you don't have any time for yourself, and they're okay with that. In fact, it's tied to your righteousness.
Yeah.
Like the ideal church member is, going to the temple multiple times a week, has a calling that takes up a lot of time, and it's totally, they don't even see how many hooks are
Yeah.
are inside them.
It's
it's
a
it's just
hamster
taken
wheel.
over their
You never
life.
get
Yeah.
off. Yeah.
And like if you say no or have a need, then it's already framed in like, oh, I'm being selfish or unrighteous. I
Mm-hmm.
should be selfless. I don't want to inconvenience other. Like you've literally reprogrammed
Yeah.
your internal compass to not know what you need because you have convinced yourself that you don't have needs. And just going back to always giving up that authority to an external authority like a general authority or a stake president or something. Uh, I, I have this axe to grind where like I want to give the church all the credit in the world. They still do a lot of good things in Exmo groups. I'm kind of the one that plays the role of like, well, it's not all bad. Here's some
Mm-hmm.
good positive
Of
things that they've
course.
done. It will always be my culture, my history, and
Yep.
my community, like
Yep. I feel
in
the
many
same.
ways.
Yep.
And so I want to give that deference. But one of my biggest criticisms that the church needs to address this, or it will be forever in my mind labeled a toxic organization, which I think
Mm-hmm.
is the most likely case. But because of this tendency, what we've been talking about, people will be 40, 50, 60 years old, and they will be on the emotional maturity
Yep.
level of a sixth grader. Like they
Yep.
don't know what to
No.
do. They look to others. They've looked to others
Yeah.
their whole life. They have no sense of their internal moral compass. They have given that power up long ago, and the church is okay with that. And I just
Yeah. And they look to the
that's
church. That's
bad.
who they look to, especially when they're parenting. That's the thing. How many LDS parents let the church parent their children? I mean, I feel I was kind of that way. My parents never, they let the church basically kind of raise me, in a lot of ways. So, yeah, I can't even say it, infantilization. Yeah. Of grown adults. I think people are really shocked by that. So, and I was thinking about the idea that you feel so horrible if you're not meeting someone else's needs. Like we talked about, it reminds me of a calling, say, of being a visiting teacher, right? So I have a friend in the ward. We're friends. We talk. We don't talk. We did talk, whatever. We were just friends in the ward. As soon as she was called to be my visiting teacher, every time I saw her, it wasn't just, hey, what's going on? It was, oh, I'm so bad. I'm so bad. I'm so sorry. I didn't come over. I'm like, what are you talking about? Oh, I'm so bad. Every single time. It turned from a friendship to I'm now her responsibility and she's not meeting it and she feels terrible. Every single time it was, I am so sorry. And that just puts your relationship on such a weird level. I'm like, no, really, it's totally fine. We talk all the time. But yeah, I'm sure you've experienced that too. I'm so bad.
Yeah, actually that was one of the big things that allowed me to start questioning, really asking hard questions and looking into the church. One of my top shelf items, if not number one, it might have been number one. But for the longest time, I was always bothered by why are the best people in the church the least happy? Like they're so
Yeah.
hard on themselves,
Yeah.
even though they're doing the most, but they feel like exactly like what you said, like, oh, I'm so bad, I didn't do
I'm
this thing, or
sorry.
you know,
Yeah.
I missed my weekly temple visit. I have the goal of
Yeah.
going to the temple every week and I just went once a month this time. I'm like, what is going on here? But I was the same way. That's why they were my friends, is because we took the
Yeah.
gospel seriously. But as a group, I think it was undeniable that we were far less happy than the people who were, you know, I don't know how to describe it other than like didn't take the gospel as seriously. They just kind of
Exactly.
did what worked for them, and they seemed like a lot more carefree. And we were
Yeah.
always like, oh, are we doing the right thing? All the like it, that really bothered me when I was in the church,
Yeah.
and I was like, this is not right. Something is off here.
No, and
And
it's
and so
tragic because the kids that get caught in worthiness interviews and stuff like that, and the endless cycle of guilt, they are the ones that internalize it, that have the scrupulosity. All the rest of the kids are like, whatever, I don't need to confess that. I don't need to talk about that. That's no one's business. But the kids that get stuck in that just damaging cycle are the ones that do care, and they're trapped there. But there's such a high expectation. And I think it's also why people learn to lie in the church, because when you're a people pleaser or a doormat, the worst thing is to disappoint somebody. So you kind of have to spin it, even though that's hard on you too. And I mean, I learned to be a great liar in the church. I remember when I had just moved into my new apartment as a newlywed, and this lady called me up and she goes, hey, I'm your new, it was something like temple organization coordinator. How many times have you gone to the temple this month? And yeah, they really were people that did this. And I remember thinking, oh dear, well, I mean, I just moved in. What would I'm going to say, because what would be a good answer? I said 5. I hadn't gone at all, but I lied and I said 5. And she goes, oh, that's okay, honey. You're just newly married and barely moved in. I'm sure you'll do better next week. I'm like, oh my gosh. But, I felt horrible about lying. I felt horrible about not going. But what are you going to do? The lie is better than telling the truth. So I think that's why we all learn to be liars too, because we're people pleasers.
yep, I actually remember. I can't remember where this lesson happened, but it was a lesson about justifying lying, basically. Like
Yes.
I remember um, President Hinckley was the prophet at the time, and his background is in media, and so that's kind of the spin they took at it, was like you just need to be savvy, like President
Hmm.
Hinckley, and like it's not lying if and he gave all these exceptions. And one of the exceptions, he actually showed a clip of President Hinckley doing this in an interview, of like the journalist asks a question and President Hinckley doesn't answer the question. He
Yeah.
talks about something else.
Yep,
And
that's
they taught
classic.
this as like
Yep,
here's a good tactic that we should all learn. You know, if
yep.
something comes up that puts the church in a bad light, you change the topic or answer a different question.
Yep.
And the way they spun it, I'll never forget, is it's not lying, it's answering the question that should have been asked. That's what he
Oh
said.
my goodness. Yeah, that's a Brad Wilcoxian kind of a thing to do, isn't it? Yes, you really should have been asking. Yeah, but that's a tactic all the time.
Yeah, and it just goes back to breaking down your sense of self, your internal moral compass of what's right and wrong. It's like, hey, what makes you uncomfortable? It makes you feel bad. Like we need to, re-engineer and re-indoctrinate you if it suits our purposes. Okay, so on that note, after talking about the first two types, a healthy relationship looks like this, where it's like, hey, it's maybe not exactly 50-50. We don't want to be too, measuring in relationships. Relationships are fluid, but definitely, if things tend toward the bottom, which again, we've given several examples of like, oh, what would the stake president think? For
Hmm.
this relationship, I gotta go
Yeah,
all the way across the line,
yeah.
not thinking about me, just like I gotta please God, I gotta please the organization, I gotta please other people so much that I will bend over backwards for every little thing to keep them happy, because that's what I've been inculcated and taught that is a good thing to do, like make others happy. And that's just, how we do things. It's extremely unhealthy, and you don't even know where you've lost yourself because you've given up so much of yourself for so long. So like we talked about, I think last time, boundaries are reciprocal. People should naturally respect you. And if you're not getting that, you really need to rethink that relationship. Um, would you go ahead and read this quote?
Yeah, sure. It says, whenever they need to protect themselves by saying no, the word catches in their throats. This happens for different reasons: the fear of hurting person's feelings, the fear of abandonment and separateness, a wish to be totally dependent on another, fear of someone else's anger, fear of punishment, fear of being shamed, fear of being seen as bad or selfish, fear of being unspiritual, fear of one's overstrict critical conscience. This last fear is actually experienced as guilt. People who have an overstrict critical conscience will constantly condemn themselves. Let's see. Is that compliment?
Complaints.
Complaints. Oh my goodness.
Complaints.
Is that spelled right? I think it should be AI. That's why I couldn't.
Oh yeah, sorry, my bad.
I was like, compliments? Okay.
No, 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 no. Actually, that is correctly spelled.
Compliance, I think.
Yeah, in the book, he categorizes people that we talked about as
Okay.
compliance, people who
Okay.
are
That's
generally
okay.
compliant.
Okay, yes, a person who is compliant take on too many responsibilities and set too few boundaries because they are afraid. This is Henry Cloud from Boundaries.
Yeah, so if any person or organization in your life is using guilt to influence your decisions, you can take that as proof positive that that's an unhealthy thing. But, my heart goes out to these people because they are conscientious and they
Yeah.
do want to do the right thing, and they are very naturally self-condemning. So again, it's a process. We're here for you. It takes a long time, but one of the things that helped me is and the church will use this. So use this. So you can use plenty of things in church doctrine to assert yourself. When I do coaching with people, one of the first things I give them as a tool, if they're very religious, is as an answer to say no to someone, you say, "Oh, I feel God has told me this," or in the church, I've received personal revelation that
Yep.
this is not right for me or my family. It's a very real, legitimate, and recognized as legitimate way to set a boundary, take back some of your power, and realize that, like, look, you have needs, you have things that you need to take care of too. And people, one of the things I talked with someone recently, you are taking away the opportunity for them to how to deal with their own shit.
Yeah,
That's a life skill that they maybe need.
that's right. No, I love that. And I love using the personal revelation because that puts it right back on them. You cannot argue with that. You have learned that the whole time. And if you say, for me in my house, God has told us we're not going to do this, there's no way to argue back on that as long as you stick your ground there, because I know they'll say something like, are you sure? But yep, that's a way to take back that power for sure.
Yeah, and we could get into a whole discussion about that because Elder Holland is actually made one statement against that. So we'll see
Oh yeah,
how
no,
far that
completely.
goes.
No, I remember reading that parents, some parents have started to give their children, kind of arm them with a boundary. If they must go to worthiness interviews, that they've told their kids, you can say, my parents told me that I do not need to talk about, a sexual topic with you, or whatever. Just they're armed with a boundary. Oh my gosh, what I would have given to have some words like that. When something's wrong, what you're being asked, and it's so uncomfortable, but you don't have the words or the experience to even hold your hand up and say there's a boundary there. But to even arm kids with boundaries like that, just so you have it at the ready to be able to say it like that. I think that's amazing, and I hope more people do that.
Absolutely. And the purpose of this slide, even though we've gone over this so much, I still think this is the most common type within the church. So the reason I include this slide is because all the people who maybe are in this group and are hard on themselves because of what we're saying of why it's bad, I want you to lighten up and be like, look, your behavior, even if it doesn't change, like I would recommend stronger boundaries that comes with consequences that might make you uncomfortable, might have, negative consequences in the short term. That's true. You make your own decisions. But I do want to validate that people pleasers like Rebecca, myself, and many of our audience, there are very understandable, very sympathetic reasons for why you do what you do. So, for example, you think that your identity is a good boy or a good girl or woman or man or whatever, and that's who you are. Like you get satisfaction from people perceiving you as such. That is a very strong motivator for your behavior. And you think that you'll get acceptance and love from people by being obedient and compliant. So I just want to validate that, like, look, there's good reasons for doing what I would call bad behavior, but you are getting something from it. So it's going to take a long time to change. And even if you don't change, like just at the end of the day, realize you are getting something in exchange for your what I would call bad boundaries. Does that make sense?
No, it does make sense. I mean, otherwise we wouldn't continue to do it. But you
Yeah.
do get something, and that's just how some people are created. I'm that way.
Yep. And this very much describes me. I loved being seen as an achiever. Like if I always did all these things that made others happy and I could check off the list of like, oh, I did this and this and
Mhm.
aren't I so good? That feedback what was positive. I got positive attention for
Yep.
that. I got acceptance from doing those things all the time for others. I wanted to be a helper. I mean, I do probably still to this day. I get great satisfaction be like, oh, that's what my life hacks book is about.
Right.
Is like, oh, I rescued people from a problem, from something that's super easy, and all they had to do was like know a tool or a phrase that they didn't, weren't aware of. I love doing that. I get great satisfaction from my life. Like you could argue like that's why I come on your show. I want to share useful information with people. And people
That's
are like, oh,
right.
that helped me. And I'm like, oh, that makes me happy. Like that's why I do this, maybe.
Kendel can't say no. I'm like, Kendel, come on. Yes.
Yeah, I seriously do have like five other topics that I think will change your audience's life. So I love it. You could take advantage of this pretty much all the time within reason.
Within reason, that's right. Although, have you found, I mean, now that you're, more of a public persona and people comment on, episodes and things like that, I found that now, you'll get pushback or criticism. I'm like, whatever, I don't care. In the past, I might have tried to address every single thing or felt really bad. But, if I have somebody that comments, you suck, I'm like, whatever. I'm doing the
No,
best I can, right?
fortunately,
So that would
fortunately,
have been
I spend
devastating in the
money.
past.
Yeah, fortunately, I spend money on my own coaching. And when I had what's it called? Imposter syndrome
Yes.
before I published my first videos on my Learned Empowerment channel. And that's what my coach said. He's like, look, the price of success in coaching and YouTubing is criticism. You will get people who will make
Yeah.
fun of your hair,
Uh-huh.
your
Oh, yeah.
appearance, your tone of voice. Like
Yep.
just expect it. It's coming.
Yep. I get
By
all that.
virtue of you uploading your first video, that is the other half of the equation that will happen. And so I
Yep.
expected it. So it wasn't as hard when I
Yeah.
when I got it. And
Yeah.
frankly, I am open to all feedback. I know I'm not perfect. Like I'll take your
Exactly.
feedback for whatever it's worth. Even if you're a negative person, maybe there is something I could learn from in there. I think that's totally healthy, and it is my responsibility, my reactions. Like even if you say something in a vitriolic, mean-spirited way, I still have the choice to be like, well, I can choose how I'm gonna take this. Now, if it becomes
Yeah.
a pattern, that relationship might
Yeah.
be
Then that's
affected. But some
abusive,
rando,
right?
some rando on the internet,
Yeah.
like why are you so like upset at me? Like clearly
Exactly.
there's something going on with you. So I'm
No,
gonna
and
have
to
more
me, that's a
compassion.
positive. So if somebody's going to attack me, appearance or just say, you suck or you're horrible or you're ugly, I've gotten all those kinds of things. I think, oh, I must have said something that made them think. I must have said something that they don't have an answer to. And all they can do, is criticize an appearance or something like that. So you eventually, I think, kind of take it as a compliment where you're like, you got nothing
Yeah,
else to say. So
if they
go
can't
ahead,
if
bring
they
it
can't
on. I've
engage you
heard it
on the
all.
merits, yeah, there's definitely something up with them because that's even with the intellectuals that are still in the church in my life, I'll tell them like, look, if you can think of a better argument for a better position, I will change my position. Like I have no
Exactly.
fear.
Yeah.
But it's those same people that react so strongly when I bring up some topic that they know at the back of their mind there is no good answer to,
Yeah.
so they have to change the topic or be defensive or attack me
Oh,
as
yeah.
a person instead because there is no good answer and they're just feeling vulnerable.
Exactly. Well, I always go right at people and I go, oh my gosh, really? I mean, if you have counter evidence to what I brought up, I would love to correct that. Can you email me? I'd love to have you on the show, or I'll talk about that on the newscast. Can you, yeah, please, give me your contact information. If I said something incorrect, I want to make that right. And I've never had anybody take me up on anything, even though they go at me for what I've said. And I've said, please come on, let's talk about, what you're saying is what I got wrong. No one will ever do
Yeah,
it.
I actually love this aspect of being more known in the XMO
I
podcasting
know.
community because one of my new friends has a podcast pro LDS,
Uh-huh.
and I will challenge them and be like, hey, you just said doctrines don't change, so name some doctrines you think have never changed, and
Yeah.
are you open to evidence that I can show that like, hey, actually at one time the church did teach something different about
Yes.
God or this other topic or this the ordinances in the temple, for example.
Hmm.
Like all these things that were definitely said as unchangeable
Right.
have changed. Like,
Yep.
are you open to that conversation? His response, completely different topic, would not
Exactly.
engage.
Exactly. He was being savvy, right? Let's talk about something else.
Yeah, exactly. But anyway, going back to people pleasers, like you think that if enough people rely on you, then others will care about you and love you. That's why you want to be a helper. They're a peacemaker. They want to reduce conflict, thinking that if there isn't conflict and you just take away the consequences for all people's actions, then everyone is happy and content. Contention is of the devil. We never want to like ruffle feathers or, you know, address issues because that might cause problems and drama. So let's just eliminate problems. Let's become enablers and rescuers, and they think that will get them love.
Well, and that's why a lot of people who are raised LDS don't know how to have a healthy argument. The word argue is not necessarily unhealthy if you do it in a right way, work things out. I mean, it's that whole I was raised with the don't be Layman and Lemuel. Oh no, don't be a naysayer, don't have contention. You kind of avoid, you back out of it. You never learn that it's okay. You never learn to express yourself or your opinion really if there's anything that's different from someone else's opinion. So,
Yeah, and the word you used was perfect. That's what I was going to say is even the word different
mhm.
is threatening.
Oh
We
yeah.
all have to be the same. We have to be on the same page. We have to be united. What's that scripture? Be ye one. If you're not one,
Yeah.
you're not mine. Something like that in the Doctrine and Covenants. So it's very much ingrained. And yeah, I love how you took back argue is not bad. In
Mhm.
fact, there's this book that I recommend to all parents. It's stellar. It's called The Logic Detective. It's teaching kids, little children, critical thinking. And I was teaching it to my son over the summer, and that was one of his things. He's like, Dad, you keep saying like argue and argument, like that's bad.
Hmm.
And I'm like, no, no. To argue is just to make different points. And that's why we're learning about fallacies is to make a point in a flawed way hurts the way you think. And we want to think really well, really strongly. And the way to do that is to make arguments. Arguments aren't bad. It's just the way that you back up what you think and believe. It's just the way that you justify things if they're reasonable or not reasonable. He's like, oh, you mean like just giving reasons? Yeah, you're just giving reasons.
Exactly. Wow, your son is very smart. Just giving reasons. That's it. I love it.
Yeah. So, but that process of exchanging reasons, if you don't agree with the reasons, yeah, my opinion is Mormons suck at that.
Yes. Yeah. Yep.
It's like like we started with, obedience is the first law of heaven, and that scripture that is in the Pearl of Great Price, where Adam is held up as an example to all believers of, why are you doing these things? I know not, save I was commanded. Like, that's the standard, and it's terrible.
Yeah.
Avoider, they just take the
Yeah.
path of least resistance. But again, the benefit they get from that is thinking that if you avoid confrontation, then you avoid rejection, and that's good.
Yeah.
Everything
always comes back, though. I'm notorious for always taking that path, but everything circles back. You may superficially in the moment have avoided something by just going, yeah, but it will always come back until it's resolved. And sometimes it can be
builds
years.
resentments, and nine times out of 10, it doesn't solve anything. It just prolongs the problem and makes it worse.
It does. And sometimes it makes you the person that tried really hard, to be least resistant. It makes you the bad guy because you didn't do it right. You weren't upfront and you weren't clear. I think people pleasers have a hard time being clear because they
do
kind of wiggle around. They don't want to hurt anybody. And when you're not clear, that leads to misunderstandings and confusion with people. So I've had to work on that a lot, trying to be really direct, because my nature is not to be, just to be, oh yeah, sure. Yeah, that's okay. Yeah.
That is the number one thing when I coach people on communication. They think that being vague is tactful.
Yeah, that's it. Yep.
That's the phrase, especially in Mormonism, like, always be tactful. And what they mean by tactful is don't be clear.
Yeah.
They like say something, but don't make it so that they actually get what you're trying to say. You just say it, and then hopefully it never comes up again.
Well, you kind of described conference, right? Where it's a lot of vague things that are said and repeated over and over. And it's, what do they really mean? We don't know.
Yeah. And so, I forget the answer I give to people, but yeah, the best thing you can do in communication, the whole purpose of communication is to convey your position. Hey, there's this problem. I think this is the solution. I'm open to other solutions. Let's solve it. But they never even say the problem. It never even comes out of their mouth, because to say that there's a problem might get a bad reaction, or might mean you think I'm exhausting, or I'll get criticism, or you'll get defensive. I mean, there's so many barriers to that. So they don't advocate for themselves. They mold for their personality to others or the organization, and they lose themselves, and you become unhappy. And so this is just one way to get out of that. And I have to say to your entire audience, your value is intrinsic. You can like yourself and think you're worthy 100% independent of what other people think. And if at the times where you do say, hey, this is important to me, or this is what I want, or this would make me happy, and the other organization or party or person responds negatively, again, really think deeply about that relationship. Like, anyone who came to me saying like, hey, I prefer this, or this would make me happy, I would absolutely at least consider it. Like, maybe I won't give them their way, but if you're being just dismissed at the drop of the hat anytime you have a need or a desire or a preference, that's probably an unhealthy relationship.
Well, it is, but some people have such a hard time even expressing a need. I was raised that way. I mean, you didn't say on a family road trip, I'm thirsty, let's stop for a drink. You'd say, is anybody thirsty? And you would hope that someone would guess that you were thirsty and you wanted to stop. But if they didn't guess that, no, we're good, we're fine. Let's
we play
then
all
you would
these
not
games.
Get that drink. Yeah, and that was me. Does anyone else want this? Hoping they would know that I actually wanted it. But to say, I need this, that was not something I ever did.
Okay, here's a great video to encapsulate all this about people pleasers. This comes from the Well-Being Coach. It's a video, so here it is.
A poem for people pleasers. Excuse me, I'm sorry. Excuse me, I'm sorry. I don't mean to impose, but if you have just a minute, could you listen to this poem? Don't worry, it won't offend anyone, and if it does, I'm already sorry. And here, While you listen, you can stand on my feet just to make sure I don't step on your toes. And if there's anything you don't like, please let me know. You see, I have many masks and I can easily mold. If you think I'm too loud, I can be quiet. If you think I'm too warm, I can be cold. If you think I'm too careful, I can be reckless. If you think I'm too mean, I can be nice. If you want it, I can be it. I can be what you like. I can be what you like. I don't know what I'm like. I don't know what I like. I don't know who I am. I'm not sure if I know the difference anymore between me and my masks. I can't take them off now. I've been wearing them for so long, and I'm afraid if I do, the person underneath will be gone. Who was I? Before I cared what you think, which mask looks the most like who I want to be?
So when you people please or are doormat, you are literally giving the keys to your house and your life to others.
Wow, that is powerful and heartbreaking, because I think a lot of us raised in a certain system that we're talking about can relate to this, at least on some level, some way more than others. It's heartbreaking.
Yeah, and it's so tragic because after so many years in a system like that, you really do think like here's the keys.
Mm-hmm.
You'll do a better job running my life than me.
Mm-hmm.
They really think that.
Yeah, well, and a lot of us have taken the huge step of non-people pleasing, of stepping away from the church that you were raised in. And then you get the reaction from friends and family, you have changed all the time. You've changed. What happened to you?
You
You've
lost your
changed.
light.
You've changed. Yeah, the light has gone out, when in reality, like you talked about earlier, you're finally kind of giving yourself permission, or just realizing who you might actually be and taking autonomous steps to reveal that to everybody else. But unfortunately, everyone knew you, for decades this way, and you've changed. It's I can see why it's scary to people, and
Yeah, because you will encounter that. People will push back and they'll try what you describe, which is known in psychology as blame reversal. Like, oh, I'm feeling uncomfortable for my bad behavior. Must be your fault. There's something wrong with you. I'm going to attack you. That absolutely does happen. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. People will react negatively if they're unhealthy to healthy boundaries. Okay. So we kind of, I think last time already went over this process, so I'll just go over quickly. So acknowledge the patterns, realize what you're doing and what you need to do to get out of it. Understand the impact on your life of these behaviors. Again, there are consequences to healthy behavior, and if the unhealthy behavior is getting you some of the things you want, just know that it's a trade-off. Everything in life is a trade-off. So I'm not going to say that this way is 100% better. It's not. Some things will be harder. But I think overall, you'll see better patterns if you choose to take this tack. So set boundaries and say no. I think that happiness is found to be authentically yourself among safe people. And in my case, no matter how reasonable and 50-50 and win-win mentality I was, just the people around me had no interest in that type of thing. And so the number one healthiest thing I've had to do since distancing myself from the church and other things is finding new people. New community has helped more than anything else, because my old community just patently had poor boundaries and didn't respect me. So yeah, if you are around people that do not enthusiastically welcome differences and care about your true thoughts and feelings, find new people. Number one thing that has helped me personally. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, find new people is great. And you do tend to gravitate in new circles and meet new people that are amazing. Of course, when it comes to family, that's a more dicier scenario, because, if you value those relationships, sometimes there has to be navigation and stuff like that. Even if they're not giving you exactly what you want, it just depends on how much you value that relationship. And I've talked before about being, a parent of kids that are in the church, and I give them every leeway. They can do whatever they want. They can say whatever they want to me, whatever. I'm trying to value the relationship, and, I try not to be hurt by things. I try to take everything with a grain of salt, and I'm sure they also have tried to set some things up so that we can still interact. You know what I mean? Because I value that. So I'm willing to maybe not be so great about my rules and my boundaries because I want that relationship. So, and that ebbs and flows, and my overarching concept with all my kids that are still in is just call me when you're 40. I bet you're going to have a different perspective than you do now in your 20s. And so that's it. So sometimes family can be, a lot more difficult than just saying I'm finding a new friend group. So, but sometimes you have to take extreme with family too. Yeah.
Yeah. And you can't control others, and you have to realize, what's realistic in the face of what they're going to do if you value that relationship. But in the top 5 misconceptions I would put in boundaries is this idea that it's all or nothing. Like, no, like your choices aren't just like give in all the time or cut them off, but that's the tendency of a lot of people I work with this on. It's absolutely a scale, and you can put whatever distance, whatever boundaries that, again, boundaries are totally what you're going to do. You don't have to cut them off totally, but you also don't have to put up with, if they bring up a certain topic or make you feel uncomfortable, or always, the example I give is like bringing up your weight. If you ask them like, hey, that's not appropriate, don't bring that topic up to me. I'm going to walk away. You can do that on any different metric of things in that relationship. You can provide that distance when those things occur. That is an option that you can consider, and that doesn't mean you don't talk to them ever. It just means that there is something you do when they make you feel uncomfortable or violate safety. And if they care about you, over time, that relationship will morph into something hopefully better. They may not like it at first, but I mean, saying like, hey, don't bring up my weight or I'm going to do this is a very reasonable thing. If they can't allow that, then I mean, I don't know what to tell you if you still value the relationship, but I'm here to tell you there's lots of options you can choose, and it's not going to jump to just no contact. That is a false.
No, and it's very fluid, absolutely. But I mean, one of the sadder things, and I did this myself, and I've heard of others that do it. I talk about my parents a lot, and they passed away last year, and I never told them I left. They never knew anything about kind of who I really was or who I'd kind of become in the last couple of years. They never knew anything about that, because I was protecting them. They wouldn't understand. They're older. To preserve the relationship, I just kind of continued with the same. When I'd go to visit them in their care center, I'd talk all church. And of course I was up on the latest church news, all of it, right? But I would, I'd be able to talk about all that. And so, but is that a regret? And maybe a huge regret later that they never really knew kind of who I'd become, or maybe more of my real self. I don't know, but it's what worked at the time for me, or what I thought was best. And I've heard others say that too. I'm not going to talk to my parents. They wouldn't understand. So
I think I said on the last cast that, my biggest regret is not realizing, hey, this whole idea that I got from the church of being 100% honest all the time, like, saying you've left the church or lost your testimony, I actually don't think I've left the church. I live in Utah. I don't think I can totally leave the church. I think it's impossible. Yeah. But I have not become a true literal believer.
Right.
So I should say that way more. But one of the things I wish I realized when I initially lost my faith, my literal faith, was this idea that I had this obligation to tell everyone in my life. Like I really had the choice to keep that to myself, especially because, like what we talked about, if they're on an emotional 6th grade level and you bring this hugely complex, nuanced, life world view altering topic to them, they're not ready for it. I wish I wouldn't have told my family, or at least been able to delay it, because I can play the game. There's, like I said, lots of positive things I can talk about with the church, and it would have been better on the relationship. They are infants emotionally, and so me bringing that up just complicated things. And I wish I could take that back. I can't, but that's my reality. And so if you're on that decision and you don't know what you want, is maybe first evaluate what the other person can handle before you set certain things. And I think especially for older people, you're totally right. Yeah. Like, what is the point of telling grandma all these controversial things in the church? Like, there's no point.
No. There's no point whatsoever. And sometimes we underestimate people, like I never mention anything about my new beliefs or anything to friends or anything. But of course, I'm a little more visible, and I've had people come up and they're like, I saw you. And I'm like, oh dear, here we go, and they're like, oh my gosh, you're so brave. I love it. I'm like, what? I underestimate. I never talked to you about this, because I just didn't think I didn't want to bother or put my views on anybody. But, it's very fluid. You just kind of have to go person by person and relationship by relationship.
Absolutely. And on that note of maybe giving people more credit in practicing this, this sounds so stupid, but this literally changed my life. So I, in my coaching, went to a session, and the whole point was for me to practice saying no. Like
Oh,
my coach would ask me a simple request, like, can you get me a glass of water? And I would have to say no.
oh
And we
my
did this
gosh,
like
that's so hard.
5, 10, 15 times. But here's the life-changing part was my coach wouldn't respond the way so many people unhealthy in my life would respond. You know what her uh, default response was to my saying no, even saying no to things that are reasonable. They just my goal was to say no. Her response almost every time was, "Thank you. Thank you for taking care of yourself."
Wow.
Isn't that a better perspective?
Yeah.
Like all these people that are like having problems with your boundaries or your preferences or your new beliefs, like they do that. That is an option for them to say, "Oh, you've given me information about
Mhm.
yourself. Thank you." Or like you're saying no to a calling. Like that is so good that you
Yeah.
are putting yourself and your needs like that's just an option to be
Yep.
glad for you. Like it didn't enter my mind, but in this practice of saying no, it really did have an impact on me. That's like, wow, like this can be seen as a good thing, saying
Yep.
no. And it's something about the other person when they don't see it that way. So again, I give that piece of knowledge, use it wisely. I don't know in
That's
what
right. In the shower, just
circumstances.
stand there and say no, no.
Yeah.
But I think about myself. If someone says no to me, like I say, could you do this? And they say I couldn't. I mean, would I hate them? Not at all. I'd probably go, oh wow, they must be going through something or they can't, or I don't know their scenario. I would never, think worse or less of somebody. So why do I think that everyone would think worse or less of me if I say no?
Yep. So get used to being
Hmm.
assertive.
Hmm.
And when you do that, you will disappoint people. It's hand in hand. But saying no and disappointing some people sometimes is normal.
Yeah.
Good, healthy relationships deal with this all the time. If your relationship can't handle one no or one that doesn't work for me,
Hmm.
or we need to figure else something else out because you've been getting your way, and I want more in the relationship. Like you need to reevaluate that because that's normal to be treated with equal dignity. That's normal. Okay, so I found this graphic online. When you're terrible at setting boundaries, but you're trying. So again, it's a process. Even if you can only say, "Hey, no, stop," in the smallest, tiniest way. Hey, more power to you. I think that's awesome.
That
You
is
you
really
do you.
funny.
You don't have to go from 0 to 60.
Yeah.
Do it in small ways at first. That's fine. Whatever. I just try. Just try. You
Right.
don't have to overcome all this. This is a lot. I'm asking a lot of you. It is fearful to change. I validate all of that. So just do what you think is right based off what Rebecca keeps saying. What are your values? What do you
Right.
prioritize? If this terribly abusive relationship is important to you, then I guess keep it. But I would strongly consider, you know, having some of those negative consequences in exchange for better
Yeah.
treatment. That's what I
Yep. It's a
usually counsel.
process.
But
I think when you're a people pleaser and you say yes and yes and yes, sometimes you say no in a big way. You know what I mean? Sometimes it's so explosive that everyone's like, whoa, where did that come from? You know what I mean? Because there's just something that you're finally pushed. And that's not a healthy way to react either, because everyone's like, wait a minute, you were fine with this whole time. And why didn't you ever let us know that that is not the way to handle it either. But unfortunately, that happens.
yeah, that's a really good reframe too. Is like when you are honest with people and give them what you really need in a relationship up front or earlier or clearer, you can reframe it in your mind as that. I am saving you
Yeah.
from a future blow up, from a
Right.
future meltdown. Like this is
Right.
a compassionate thing that I am doing for the other person. And honestly, it is true most of the time.
Hmm.
Okay. So the other types of personalities in boundaries, we got the bulldozer. Their wants and needs are constantly more important than others. They know what they want, they know what they need. They're assertive. They say that, and this is the game changer. And this is something that, has helped me, even though I'm not fully there. But just making the decision that my needs and wants are important, are valuable. Like when I start to believe that, then my behavior changes. But the number one characteristic about bulldozers is they're already convinced that their wants and needs are so important. They don't think twice about, getting their way all the time. There's nothing odd about that. That's expected for them because they're more important. Um, They expect to get their way as the default. Often there's no discussion. They just assume they're going to ask and they're going to get it. And again, it's a mindset. They teach others this early on in subtle and direct ways, and it's a huge advantage to getting what you want. If you go into a conversation already assuming that the other person's going to give you what you want, I mean, wow, that's a power move right there.
Yep.
They're very comfortable confronting others and speaking up for themselves. Their default is to dismiss others and their needs. They don't think twice about it. This isn't a big deal to them at all. And because of this, like what we were saying, like there are consequences to people saying no, you're afraid of their reaction, you don't want to lose the relationship. So because of all these tendencies, people do actually comply with
Yeah.
these people
Yeah.
most of the time because they know it's easier.
Yeah, it's exhausting. Yes, I do know some bulldozers, and when I go up against that, I can't. I'm defenseless. I can't do it. I just can't. It's just too much. The extreme
Yep.
bulldozers that we know.
Yep. And on my learned empowerment on the paid portion of the site that's going to come up soon, I have a way to deal with these people that's totally counterintuitive. Like what we're saying about boundaries and then being assertive and telling the truth, that's that's all true and what you need. But like for truly egotistical, selfish, narcissistic people, I have another tactic that's more nuanced and
Wow.
kind of controversial, but anyway, just be careful when they're true narcissists, just be careful because
Yeah.
they will attack you, they will go after you, they will get others to gang up on you. And so even though it pains me to say it, what we have taught so far in boundaries does have limits. Like
Hmm.
you really do need to protect yourself against someone who really has no interest in what's best for you. And that's what these people do. They don't see a use for relationships that disagree with them. They tend to, discard those and only keep yes men in their life. They have very low empathy. They don't when they do this to people, they don't ever put themselves in other people's shoes. They don't even fathom other people feeling negative consequences from their behavior. It never crosses their mind. They never contemplate that. Whereas you've already seen Rebecca and I always contemplate like, oh, if I do
Yeah.
this, they're gonna view me this way and I'll feel bad. Like it's a painstaking process for us. We spend a lot of time agonizing over that. To them, they don't even think about it. They just here's what I wanted. I either got it or I didn't, and they move on. Like they don't think about it. It's crazy, but it's true. Um, they are low self-monitors typically. They have low emotional intelligence. Beyond transactions, they actually do often have these skills, but they only use them or they only come out when they want something. So they're very situationally empathetic if they have empathy. And sometimes, like we've said, they just sincerely don't care about others. They're very guarded. They eschew vulnerability. They hate asking for help. They'll always play these games of, like we said before, they say it in a different way, or they spin it, or they go about, saying what they want in a roundabout way that's more manipulative. They have all these tactics to get their way. So I think of this as like the Regina George or Karen type.
Hmm.
Like you're breathing too loudly, and like That's the problem. It's never a problem with like, hey, you're being controlling or unreasonable. Like,
Right.
no, like you're breathing. That's the only problem in this room because I'm important and my needs are more important than anyone else. That is the mindset captured by this. And you'll see it everywhere. Like doubt your doubts. You have a problem? Well, maybe
Yeah.
you should doubt that, you
It's
know?
you.
Yeah, they turn it around, everything.
Yeah.
Turn it around. Like a reasonable request or an accommodation gets turned into you're exhausting, you're demanding,
Mm.
you're, unreasonable, all these things. So here's a classic clip of that, of what we just said.
This is your room? It was my parents' room, but I made them trade me.
Jams.
Mom, could you go fix your hair? Okay.
So they've just trained the people
Yeah.
in their life to have everything be about them and their desires. And it's so unhealthy, but it happens because of all the reasons we talked about. And it's hard. It really is hard, especially when they are family and you can't totally, cut them out of your life, but just know that happens and there's things you can do and hopefully, there's other people you can get more of your needs met through. Okay, and then the final type is kind of a balance of everything, and I call it the respecter of persons. Someone who has healthy boundaries. They let people in, but they also keep people out to the degree that works for them. They know what they want, they know what their needs are, they know how to be assertive, they're okay with disappointing people within reason. Um, yeah, they know what they want and need in their relationships. They know the difference between a demand and just being assertive. Being assertive does take into account other considerations like what the other people want. A demand just is about what they want, and they don't do that. They're considerate of others as they assert their wants and needs. They're very self-aware, but they don't let those weaknesses deter them from their goal. They don't take responsibilities for others. They allow discomfort. And this is where people pleasers go wrong. People pleasers honor others, but they don't honor self. And the number one uh, differentiator of a respecter of persons is they do both all the time. You're important and I'm important. It's not one or the other. We're finding a way that works for both. And if it goes too long, then I'm just going to make my decision. But there's always the attempt to find a win-win because they do care. They care about others, but not to the extent that they're going to let themselves be lost in the relationship. Do you have any thoughts or comments on that?
No, I think that's great. And like you said, it's a process. I mean, I've been in scenarios where you try to assert your needs, the other person back and forth, and you finally just kind of give up. You try. And so all you can do is keep trying, honestly, because everybody that you deal with is going to be different. But keeping this in mind, I think, is really important, just so you know that you're kind of on the right path, the right track, you're using the right tools. Even if you're not perfect at using them right now, at least you can become aware of them and keep trying.
Yep, and that's a hallmark is they are aware of their good and bad, and
Mhm.
they've accepted themselves, warts and all. They know they have weaknesses. They're okay with that. A lot of these other groups kind of use delusion and masking to cover that, but these people know, like, hey, when I'm in this situation, I get angry, or if
Yeah.
you bring up this topic, I'm gonna be this way. Like that's just the pattern of my life. Just be aware and let's have these boundaries. Again, the whole point of boundaries is to help both people, the relationship be the best it can be. It's not just about getting your way. It's about, what is best considering all these facts about weaknesses and preferences and needs. Um, they take responsibility for their contributions to problems, but they also hold other people accountable. They don't play the blame game. They know that 99.9% of problems have two people contributing at least some aspects to the problem. And so they approach it with, let's solve it together. We're on the same team here against the problem. It's not us versus them, me versus you. It's us trying to figure out and solve this problem together. I wish the church would adopt this mentality for all their issues. Like how many things, if they would just acknowledge are a problem, they would get millions of members saying, hey, I want to help with this problem. I want this church to be the best it can be. I see that all the time, but you can't get there if you're just denying the problem all the time and you're not self-aware of
Mm-mm.
the reality.
Well, they flat out said, we do not apologize. But there are so many things that need an apology, or at least an acknowledgement, so that everyone can move forward, but they do not.
Yeah, and this is the saddest thing, and it trickles down to individual members. I think it would make the church more sympathetic, more lovable if they
Yeah.
said, "Hey, yeah, we
Yeah.
we did some bad things, guys. We're sorry."
Yeah.
Like that would just melt my heart if the church
Yeah.
all of a sudden said, "You know what? This Elder Oaks thing of never saying sorry, that
Yeah.
was BS.
Yeah.
We are
We're
very
sorry
sorry
about
for
that.
all these things, and this is what we're going to do." Like
Yeah.
it would seriously change almost everything about how I feel
Well,
about the church.
think about the example where who is it? Streeter put out the fake apology letter for the priesthood ban. And of course, nobody came out and said, we in the faithful community, we need an apology. But when that came out and they thought it was real for those few moments, everyone's like, oh, thank you. Thank you. We've needed this. And then it turned out, kind of just be making that point that there is nothing like that. It's a problem, though, because everything that they've ever done has been under the direction of God. So you can't dial that back. You can't make an apology. You can say temporary commandments. Maybe that's a way. It's not an apology, but it's a way to say, we thought this was right then. Now it's not. I don't know. Maybe they'll expand on that. But there really isn't a mechanism to make an apology.
Yeah, and I'm very sad that that is the position that a lot of things in the church have landed on is like we can't do anything. That's just what God said. Who are we to question it? That's just
Yeah.
giving up, passing the buck and throwing God under the bus, and worst of all is insulating problems from examination. You can't think it through. You can't, figure it out. You can't really change it because God. Because God.
Because God, that's always the answer. Because God, and they continually do it. They continually do it.
Yeah, and it goes back to the example of Adam. Like, why doest thou these sacrifices unto the Lord? I know not, save the Lord commanded me.
Yeah.
Great, you will be blessed for that. Like, oh, it's so
Yeah. What is
unhealthy.
that phrase? When the prophet speaks, the debate is over, or the thinking stops.
The
Yeah.
thinking has been done. Yep,
Go ahead and do
yep,
it.
absolutely. Yep. They know that they need to put themselves first often. That's a huge transition. Is like, hey, my needs come first in this scenario. And after I've done that, then I can consider your proposal or your ask or your, question. And it's not being selfish. It's just, this is the order of things. I matter and I'm going to take care of my needs before others. And this was another phrase I got from my coach is like, again, teaching them that one of the best things I can do for you is how to solve your own problems. And Rebecca, let me just put you on the spot. You don't have to answer. But when whoops. That's my cat here.
Oh, cute. Wait, let me see. I love cats so much. Oh,
Yeah, he's my kitty.
oh, adorable.
Yeah. But she and I need to work on our boundaries because
You ever
can you still hear me?
Yeah. For a minute, I heard
Okay.
President Holland say, "Don't you ever."
Yes.
That was terrifying.
But yeah, I forget what I was saying, but
You're going to put me on the spot. So maybe you.
oh yeah. Oh yeah, no, thank you. That is exactly what I needed. So when was the last time you said anything like, that sounds like a you problem?
Oh, no, I would never say that. I never say
Okay,
anything like that.
I've only said that a handful of times.
Yeah.
But let me tell you, it really does like kind of send the message of like, not all of your problems are my problems,
Right.
like anyway, it's just a very powerful phrase that you
Everybody
can
learn that.
you can use. Like it's not natural for me to say, but it's had very positive results. I mean, sometimes again, there's short-term fallout,
Right.
but overall, it really does send the message of like, you're you and I'm me, and you're
Right.
putting this on me is crossing a boundary.
It's
Like,
not me. It's
that's
you.
your problem. Yeah.
That's exactly. But I will say again, just with this number 5, putting yourself first, I'm seeing this trend on faithful social media where people will say, oh my gosh, I already have 2 callings and I have 3 kids and they just asked me to do X. Am I wrong in saying I don't want to? So they're at this point where they're asking permission but at least they're entertaining the idea of not saying it. And then the answers from other people on the sub are always like, you can totally say no. You have to take care of yourself. So, asking permission or getting some kind of community consensus within the LDS circles, it is okay, to put the oxygen mask on yourself. I think things are trending that way just because I think people are completely overworked and overloaded. As I hear reports of people, like you say, the same 10% always doing everything in a ward, the same couple people holding the major callings. And they're looking at their families and going, they're suffering. Where in the past, I don't know if they would see that. So I love that trend that even though asking permission, they're saying, I think I want to say no. What do you guys think about this? And people are like totally supportive. So with that support, people are able to have more autonomy and put themselves first, at least a little more often, I think.
Yeah, and when I was in the church, I super regret never saying no. I was always saying yes. But just to those people who again are in there and feel the need to stay there, that's fine. You do you. But just know that there's another option, which is kind of what we're saying, which is like, okay, you've asked me to do this. Here's my problems with that. I can do this and this, or you can work with me to solve this problem. Like put it back on them. Like that's an option. Be like, in order to say yes, you need to do this for me. That is totally fair and reasonable to do.
Yep.
It's not just yes or no. It's not just all or nothing. You can say, hey, here's the issues I have. These will solve it. I'll only do part of the calling. Like I'll never forget one of the people I was talking to while I was in the church. They had a primary calling, but like just because of something the bishop was doing, like they had to do all of scouting too for that age group. And like, it's okay to say, no, you called me to the primary. I'm going to be this, function in the primary. This other thing, you can call someone else to do. Like, I'm not going to take that on my plate. I'll do this calling, but to me, this is what this calling means and not that.
It's hard to get over that idea, though, that you're ingrained, that your bishop knows better, knows best what's for the calling. Like I remember a time where with my youngest, I was teaching his class and he was doing really well, and he was attending church and he liked it because I was his teacher. And it was working so well. And the bishop goes, I think it was very random. We're going to move you over here. And I remember thinking, oh, this is going to be really hard for my child because he really likes being in the class with me and it works really well. And he kind of helps me. We kind of team teach almost, but instead I go, sure. And of course, when I stopped going, he stopped going. Of course, back then, now that would be a good thing. Back then, that was a bad thing. But I really should have been assertive and said, you know what, at this point, this is working really well for my family that we're kind of doing this together. It's giving me and my son a chance to bond, to do this. I'd like to stay here. I never said that at all. And the bishop might have said, great, stay. I wasn't aware of that. I didn't make anybody aware of that. I just said, okay. And I moved to do something else. So, all they can do is say no back to you, right? And then you can say no to them. That's what you can do. But I never gave my bishop even the opportunity to weigh my situation because I didn't make him aware.
Right. Yep. So good on the people who know that and can take their power back a little bit because you do have options. Your needs and concerns do matter. You don't have to just say yes in blind faith. Okay, so those are the type of boundaries.
Although we're told to say yes in blind faith. So, in our defense, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And like I said, I have complete compassion for people who do this. I still have an issue with it because of my identity and where I think, my lovability and worth comes from. Like that's going to take a long time to really change. But you have options. And again, all of these things, like that inner box is to protect your peace and your life. And those things matter. Hopefully they don't, matter so much that you don't care about others. That's going to the extreme. But I don't think most of the people we're talking to will ever have that problem. Even if you're accused of that, I would definitely question that for most people.
Yeah.
Okay. How much time do we have left? This is kind of a few more minutes to think about it visually.
I think we're fine. My cold medicine is wearing off. You can hear my voice going. Ugh. So if I can't talk at all, I'll just motion to you and you finish everything up.
Okay. I'll try.
No, we're fine. Go ahead.
Okay.
So good.
So again,
so important.
Try to think about this not as like you're disappointing people. I'm setting up these walls. I'm going to be so, rigid and uncaring. Like, think about it this way. So a lot of ways I've heard this is like, boundaries. Think about it like you're on two sides of the same street, or think about it like there's a bubble around you. Like all those things we could explain it, but this is what makes sense to me is like again, the whole purpose of boundaries is protecting yourself and the relationship to be the best it can be. And like for example, healthy boundaries is protecting your home and your yard. Think of boundaries visually as your home and your yard. And Rebecca, what is the most prized possession in your home or one of them? Something that you value, that you cherish, some material object.
Okay, so not like a person or people there, but just material objects.
It could be a person or pet, but normally, yeah, I'm looking for a material
Like if the
object.
house were to burn down, what would I
Yeah,
run in and
yeah,
grab? I have to
yeah.
say, I mean, if you really want a specific answer, I have a grandmother that was an artist, and I've inherited many of her just gorgeous, beautiful paintings. I love them. She painted them of landscapes in Washington State, where I grew up, and they're hanging on my walls. I would run in and I would grab those because they're irreplaceable. My grandmother passed away a long time ago, and I love those. So yeah, in a fire, I would grab those paintings.
Yeah, so it is not unreasonable, even in your current, like me, people-pleasing mostly state, to if someone started like throwing, I don't know,
Yeah,
paint or
paint or
like
something. Yeah, yeah.
or something that would destroy those things, you would not have an issue saying
Oh
stop
no,
doing that.
right. You're correct.
Okay. So you are just protecting something important to you, and that's reasonable, that's fair. I would encourage all of us that's having a problem with this, including myself, to think about it like those paintings. Those are valuable. That is important. That is worth protecting. Your peace of mind, your self-respect, your dignity, that is just as valuable, more so, to stand up for and to protect. And you can, in protecting that, be a better person for the other relationships in your life. So think of boundaries as protecting those paintings. It is totally reasonable to say, hey, that's important to me. Where do I point? That's important to me. These are the rules
Yeah.
governing that. Please respect them. And if you can't respect them, I will be responding in these ways. Is that helpful to think of it
Yeah, no, that
as that?
is. Because
Yeah,
you never
that
think of yourself like that as something valuable, a person that's a people pleaser. You don't think of that, or your
yeah, so
needs or your
anything
wants.
that's
So
within your house that's
yeah.
important to you like that, that is where you start with your boundaries. Again, ask yourself what's important to me, when do I get triggered, what are the things that I don't like, and start thinking of it in the same terms of protecting that painting. It's in your house, you own it. No one else has a right to say how that is governed. You do. And when someone says, hey, you should protect your paintings this way, or you should
Yeah.
allow this and this, or you should donate it, like it's so selfish to
Yeah.
keep that in your house when, your grandma had more grandkids. Like, why do you get to keep it? You're
Yeah. Why do
being
you have
bad.
those? Yeah.
Yeah, it's the same idea, really. If
Yeah.
we can transition into like, it's not selfish, it's reasonable, it's protecting your peace. And all the things within your house are things like, your choices,
Mhm.
your thoughts, your beliefs. Like, no one has a right to enter into your house and start redecorating it. That's the same with saying, like, hey, I believe this. Well, you shouldn't believe that. You should believe what I believe, and you got to
Yeah.
conform. Like, no, like, that's within your house. That is your domain. No one else has to know about it. No one else has any right to govern the rules of that. So that is your inner peace, what you want for your life, your choices, your lifestyle. Now, it does get a little more complicated because, yeah, no one has a right to barge into your house and start telling you how to decorate and arrange and live in your house. But you also have a yard, and a yard is still your stuff. It's still yours, but other people do see it. They can see it from the outside. That's things like, your career, how you dress, your body, your lifestyle to some extent,
Your religion,
your religion. Yeah,
how
they
you
they see
worship.
those
Yeah.
things. Yeah, you can't
Your
really
porn
keep
shoulders.
that to yourself. Like that is somewhat public, somewhat visible
Right.
outside your home. That's your yard. It's still yours. You still govern it. But to some extent, you are going to get comments like we said at the beginning, like a YouTube channel, people, if you put yourself out there, they're going to
Hmm.
comment on the way you do things and your
Hmm.
behavior, your appearance, all that stuff. That just comes with the territory. Is it appropriate? Most cases not, but you can't prevent that because it's visible. So you just have to expect that that's coming. You can set rules on that, but you have a little less control if it's not totally on the inside of your house, if it is visible. So I'm just setting expectations with that. And then, so yeah, that's things like, yeah, we already did that. Even relationship status is in that category. It's still yours. No one has a right to, but they will comment on it, and you have to be prepared that other people aren't going to be insulated from those things. You can't expect people to just totally pretend like that's, not a thing. So the houses and yard is your world with those differentiations, with those clarifications, and then you can step outside your world into the public square. Like you can't control, like the HOA or the laws of the country and stuff like that. Like you have to abide by those rules, and that's where it goes to, mutual safeguarding. Like, hey, hopefully the laws are fair. But if not, like in your family, if they're not fair, you can speak up and say, "Hey, when we're all together as a family, like let's find something that works for everyone. I don't really like how we're kind of all assuming that we believe one way or whatever, but you have less control and less power in there. You can speak up, but you're just one of many voices, and it's more public. You have less control, so you can expect less of people honoring those things, but you can still say, "Hey, let's make this space that is public best for the public." Does that make any sense?
Yeah, no, it really does. And I think it helps you to see why you feel different ways in each of these situations. When somebody attacks or whatever, questions what's in your home, you get very defensive, right? And then as it becomes more public, there's more wiggle room, but you're negotiating each interaction in each space. And
Yeah, but I find I get
love
less
it.
frustrated when I have that expectation. Like,
Yeah,
this is something that, the patriarch of the family has done it for this many ways for so long,
right.
my one voice, like, do I really have the right to change the way they've
Yeah,
done it
I'm not
when
going to.
they're the oldest person
Exactly.
in the family? Like,
Yep.
just kind of adjust your expectations there.
Exactly. That's it. No, I think this is a great way to think about it. I love it.
Yeah. And so to give an example, again, the goal with this example is just to kind of like maybe don't confront people about every little thing that comes up, kind of separate your level of reaction or umbrage or frustration with, depending on where the conflict takes place. So if the conflict takes place inside your house, they're literally barging into your house, like yeah, like react more
Right.
strongly and protect that more um uh protectively. I don't know the word.
Yeah.
But like one of the things when I work people is they have a hard time differentiating like what things do I react to, what things do I let slide. And so I'll give the example of like you have two neighbors, okay? So I didn't draw these right next to each other, but like let's say this can you see this mouse in between at
Uh-huh.
all?
Yeah, I can see
Okay,
it.
perfect. So let's say this is you over here and this is your neighbor. And like if they barge in and say, "Hey, you should break up with this person or whatever," or
Yeah.
like donate your paintings, like obviously
Yeah.
that's easy to say no to. Like that's
Right.
inappropriate. Why are you telling me what to do about my own house? That's pretty easy for most people. So we won't talk about that. But let's say something else happens, something that has to do with your yard. They plant a tree over here, or I guess it would have to be they implant an already pretty grown tree. And after a while, all this fruit starts dropping onto your end of the yard and starts rotting. And you have several options there. Do you say nothing? Do you just clean up the fruit and pretend, you know? But the point is when their actions over here start to affect your peace of mind, your life, that's when I would encourage you to say, "Hey,
Hmm.
this is your tree. It's encroaching on my space." That's when you speak up. Like if it's just in their thing and it's just like a visual eyesore, like maybe don't say anything.
Right.
But if it's crossing the line, if fruit is dropping into your yard, like that affects you. You should speak up if it's negatively affecting you. Again, it's pretty simplistic. It's pretty, may sound dumb, but that is what I would encourage people if they have no experience being assertive,
Right.
is how to differentiate like what things do I make an issue of when it crosses into your yard. Most people don't have a problem with their home, some people do. But if it's your yard, it's still the right thing to do. If a neighbor was causing problems, neighbors speak up. That's just what neighbors
Yeah.
do.
So
But you
funny that
know,
you would mention that because I just saw a post yesterday about a conflict over a tree. And this was a while ago, and it was leaves falling onto the one person's, and they cut the tree in half. The one home woke up one morning and the tree was sliced right in half so that none of it touched, because you have branches that overhang. Everything was cut in half. You guys should all Google this. It is now a tourist destination to go see this, physical embodiment of neighborly love, right? Or neighborly vindictiveness. But the tree continues to grow, but it is literally sliced right in half. So I thought that was really funny. It's
yeah,
apparently a
and
tourist destination.
yeah, I love that example. And so, yeah, you've already kind of answered this question because we already talked about how in the church we are kind of indoctrinated to say like, oh, if you speak up, you're the problem. But in this example with the overgrown tree, is it you telling your neighbor that the fruit is rotted and they need to do something that's the problem, or who owns the problem? Who caused the problem? The neighbor did. The
Yep.
neighbor is the one that planted the tree, that let it overgrow, that didn't clip it correctly. And so they're the one that owns the problem. And so you have every right to say, hey, this is affecting me in this way. You need to do
I'm going
something.
to show it. I don't know if you can see it right there. Look at that. There it was
Oh
before,
my gosh. Oh
and
my
there it is
gosh.
after. I know.
Yep.
I'm sure someone will say, oh, that's AI. That's not real. But I read all about it the other day. Isn't that funny?
Wow, that is funny.
Sorry, just had to look that up. Yep. No, I think this
Yep.
is a great way because everybody can understand this. Your house, your feelings of protection for things in your house, your yard, when things happen in your, get off my yard, right? Get off my lawn. And then, of course, a public space. It's interesting, though. I feel like in Utah that, the metaphorical public space, people often treat it and weigh in on it as if it was their private space. I think
Yes,
it's
I
an
think that's
example of just
completely
last,
indicative
yeah,
of us having poor boundaries, really.
that's it.
And
That's
and
it.
these
I think it's,
bulldozers that get enabled in other contexts think they're entitled to being
yeah,
enabled in this context. It
because I
makes
don't
sense.
like it. You can't do it. I mean, you probably followed last week. There was a dance class at the Provo Rec Center. It was called Dirtylicious Dancing. It's been going on for 3 years, and it's kind of some groovy dance moves, whatever. And some guy saw a video of it, decided that it wasn't what we should be doing, right? So he took it to the city council and they said, yes, this isn't what we should be doing, even though it had been wildly popular, well attended for 3 years, empowering moves for women, kind of dancing. And they shut it down. And of course, now they backtrack. They have all these reasons, well, this and that. But again, it just started for one person saying, this isn't what we do. So I
Yeah,
don't know. I
and
think
and
in
that
Utah,
goes
you
back
see that.
to rigid boundaries,
Yes.
and when they say we, they mean
Yeah.
you.
Exactly. Yeah. Isn't that funny? That's not how it works. Yep. Yep.
Yeah, because frankly, the bulldozer doesn't think twice about controlling other people. They
Right.
think that's normal and okay. And
Right.
frankly, most of their life, like we talked about, they have gotten their way and gotten other people to do pretty
Yep.
unreasonable things. And so, yeah, the rationale is secondary to just like, well, this is what I want, and I'm going to force
Yep.
people to give me what I want.
Well, and in Utah, you have God on your side. Although those rules have changed quite a bit. It used to be if anybody was drinking a Coke, this isn't what we do. We're not having this here. Now that's just fine. So it must be hard to keep up when you're trying to enforce these rules when they seem to be changing. Like, this is not what we wear, right? But now it
Yeah,
is. So
yeah.
what
Now that's
happens to
garment
everybody that
appropriate.
checked everybody for years and decades? And I don't know what they're going to check now because this is now okay.
Yep. Yep. It'll be interesting to see that realignment.
Yep.
Okay, so now we are wrapping up with this part two, and again, just to remind, boundaries start with ourselves. Like the tree is a perfect example. The Provo dancing is a perfect example of we need to take care of ourselves first and not try to control other people. So boundaries, we and no one else are responsible for our own feelings, interpretations, opinions, reactions, our attitudes, our goals, our aims, how we show up, our behavior, our choices, our limits, our triggers, our distresses. Again, to do this right, you have to have pretty high self-awareness. If you haven't worked on yourself in that, you gotta get to know yourself a little better. That was the craziest thing, losing my testimony and distancing myself is I really didn't know myself in so many ways. And that was a process. Get to know your skills and abilities, including your lack of skills, your weaknesses. Get to accepting and loving and knowing yourself, and going into relationships and scenarios knowing that these things will continue to happen. You won't magically be solved, all these things. You are responsible for your thoughts, desires, values, and needs, including your false beliefs. We all have some, so you can't, change that about others when you know something's false. Like, have patience, because you still have lots of false beliefs. None of us know everything. So those are the ways in which we need to honor ourselves and have boundaries of those things, not taking those things on others. I mean, I know for most of my life, I was taught that, as a member, if they're making certain choices and are a fellow member, I need to correct them. Correction was a form of love, like, you need to follow the prophet, or you need to follow the commandments. I saw you drinking, so it's my job as an active member to correct you. Like, really? That's really what we think? So again, boundaries are the distance at which I can love you and me at the same time. And I love this video because, again, if you're anything like me or Rebecca, you just still, after all this, feel bad and think somehow it's your fault. I like this YouTuber, his name is Josh, of what he says when, look, you're dealing with people that they just take and take, and you feel bad for saying no or setting limits on the relationship, but I like his mindset. Just listen to what he says here.
I have never come across anybody that cut their parents out of their life because they forgot to give them pocket money. I never met anybody that cut a parent out of their life because they were trying their best and sometimes they messed up. Maybe they exist, I've never met them. I have met people who have spent their whole lives abandoning themselves to try and love their parents no matter what, to try and make some kind of relationship, even if it's built on a shoestring that they have to provide. They have tried their best. In the end, they have the only option that they have is to cut the string and to put themselves first, to give themselves any opportunity in life. And then they exist in a world that wants to tell them that they're wrong and that they should make all of the effort, continue to make all of the effort to try and keep this shoestring relationship that they've managed to build, and that all of the onus should have been on them. It's wrong, it's bad, it's horrible, it's victim blaming, and you wouldn't see it in any other form of abuse. No other form of abuse would you tell the victim of abuse that they have a responsibility to try and keep that relationship going.
So what do you think about that?
Yeah, that is, oops, am I muted? No. Yep, that is intense. And that's it. There's a lot of back and forth on that. So, and I know a lot of people, there's a lot of pain, in that kind of thing too, to make those decisions.
Yep. But when you're abandoning yourself, when that relationship is all about them, I mean, again, we talked about gradations. You have lots of choices, but sometimes that is the choice. If they really don't care about you, if you really bring up, say, hey, this hurt me, what you did, and they just blow you off. I mean, you have that option if you want them in your life or not, and don't let people make you feel bad for that. You can try. You can always leave the door open. You can say, hey, this is what I need from you, and then we can do what you want. But I want my needs met first this one time, and just, that's an option. Again, consider it. There will be consequences. Maybe you don't want the consequences, but if you want a life of authenticity and self-respect, I'd seriously consider it. And then this last video, I think, is also hard advice. And I do take issue with one thing he says of where he places the blame. Yes, this principle, this is why it's hard, and I don't really like it, even though it's true, is like, you actually teach people what's okay of how to treat you. But it's not 100% on you that they treat you that way. They're also making a decision to take advantage of people-pleasing tendencies. So that's my one caveat with this video, but we'll end with this.
The price you pay for not respecting your own boundaries will only become evident the minute you start respecting your boundaries. As you go down the road of self-expression and boundaries, many of the people you know are not going to like it. And while it might be tempting to view that as a failure of their own personality or some form of narcissism, the fact is that failure is yours. You've spent an entire lifetime being agreeable and giving in to everybody else's whims and notions and demands, which has caused them to believe that's who you are. They trust that you haven't been dishonest with them and just led them to believing you are who you are so as to not upset anyone. But we know that that's not true. So all this people pleasing and manipulation is going to come back to bite you right in the ass. And you're going to have to explain some of these boundaries and be patient with the people you care about to see if they can catch up. So not only do you have to spend time inventing who you want to be, but you have to allow grace and empathy for the people that now get to decide whether they want to be around that person. And sometimes they won't. And sometimes you won't. Try to remember that just because you decide to change your life doesn't mean that anyone else is going to. Whether they do or whether they don't, it will never be up to you. Hope this helps.
So again, hard advice, but I think that kernel of truth is true. And really, this is true in so many aspects of your life. Like I've talked a little bit about my parenting, and I go through a love and logic course, and I have this online support group because even as a parent, my default tendency is just, say yes. Don't set boundaries. Don't have consequences. And to be totally transparent, like a lot of people in my son's life, I'm not his only parent. That is the default. And to say no has a high cost, but it really is the same aspect of like I teach my son like, yeah, you have gotten this in the past and other people have allowed you to do this, but we're going to start doing this now. This is the new expectation, and you can change a dynamic that's unhealthy to something that's different. Like that is totally possible. That's totally an option. And most of the time that is absolutely necessary for that relationship to thrive, or at least for growth to happen, especially in the case of indulgent parents that shield their children from any consequences in life. Those lessons need to be learned, and you can change those things. But if through your whole life you've allowed that, then yeah, you kind of are teaching them that certain behavior is okay, but you can change that at any time.
Yep, you can. It's difficult, painful, but you can. But I think that is why people say, when you do try to change, oh, you've changed, right? Or, just you're so different, or, they just look at you that way. And you're like, no, I'm actually trying to really figure out who I really am, and then I think there's a sense of, well, why were you this other way the whole time, and now you're this way. What's that? I can see how it causes, confusion. And
yeah, I've had that conversation once. One person asked why. The other people just cared of how it affected them. They did not ask why, and that says a lot, I think. But that one conversation, I had to admit, I'm like, yeah, I probably did sincerely feel that way at the time, but I was unaware of how much I was disassociating and disconnecting with myself. And you've got to understand that I'm learning about myself. I'm learning about my needs. And this is what I need now. And I think that's fair of me to ask and engage with those new things, even though, yeah, they are new. They're new to me. I didn't know this about myself because I was taught to not think that way. But now I am more aware. And so this is what I need now. And it was a great conversation.
Yep, I think it's really interesting. Life is long. It's an unfolding process, but I love this. I think this is great. Do we have a few more slides or?
No, this is all I had for today. But in presenting this, there's so many other things. We can do a part
No,
3.
I know. That's the thing. We really can.
Yeah.
Well, make
sure.
sure.
The one thing is setting limits won't disrupt a healthy relationship. We did this in part 1.
Yeah.
And that's the takeaway is like, look, if you're caring, if you're reasonable, like the fact that you are speaking up, like should not disrupt someone who really loves you and cares about you or has your best interest at heart. And if those things aren't present, then maybe you do need more and more distance or limits to that relationship until they can respect your dignity. I think every human being is inherently worthy of respect and dignity. And I think far too many people accept less than that.
Yep, there it is. That's a perfect ending. Yeah. And I mean, this is so important. And I'm sure everybody's out there taking notes. Go through again how they can access you, your information, things that you offer, because this is just so important, especially as post-Mormons, as we're kind of gathering up the pieces and trying to make it all work now going forward.
Yeah, so in a little while, the best place will be Learned Empowerment. I've transitioned my website to a new hosting, so a lot of things aren't up. You can go there and contact me, but the best way that's continually updated the most is my YouTube. It's called Learned Empowerment. My handle for all my social media, Facebook, X, is at Kendel C. So if you go to youtube.com/Kendel C, I think it'll come up. But if you search Learned Empowerment, that's what it's called.
Okay.
But the actual URL in YouTube is Kendel C,
Yes.
KendelC.
For our
Kendel
listeners,
C.
it's an E. I know, I always forget to mention that when we don't spell something else. So, yep, EL.
Yeah, but I had such positive reaction with your audience last time that they
Mhm.
can email me directly,
Oh, yeah.
learnedempowerment@gmail.com. The feedback from that first video was just overwhelmingly positive. I'm so glad people got a lot out of it. It really has changed my life learning these things, and I would be honored to continue the dialogue with anyone interested in any of these topics.
That's so awesome. I love it. Well, thank you for coming back on. And it won't be the last time. Everybody's always like, more Kendel every time we have you on. So, and I love
Okay, I'll
that
send you a
these
list
other
of topics.
resources. Yeah, send me a list of topics. I love that you have these other resources. You know, I mean, this was just, you know, this is a little grain, right, of everything that you have to offer. So, but it's so important. And I love that we're both people pleasers, so we can kind of relate as we have this discussion. And I have to say that some of this, it's difficult. We're not trying to make it sound like it's easy. And when we hear these things, even sitting right here, I'm like, oh, you know, kind of uncomfortable, because I know there are things that I need to work on, but it just sounds so hard. You know what I mean? So even
And when I
it,
work with people with behavior change in a coaching thing, one of the first things I tell them is, this comes from David Allen. He's most known for the GTD, getting things done method.
Mhm.
But what I think is equally helpful is setting your expectations for any change in your life. And I love in his book how he says, like, look, knowledge is not even half the battle. Like, in any change behavior, like, yeah, you can go from unaware to aware. You can have the knowledge, but even after having the knowledge, you know everything you should do. You know it. It's there. You've got it. Even after that point, you've still got to what he calls install the behavior. You've got to put into place in your life, in the situations, the elements where you actually act on it and remember it in the moment. Like, that's a whole process to install that behavior in your life. And then even after everything's set up correctly, you still got to implement it. And that's a whole long process. And after implementing it, you've got to adjust it. I mean, there's just so many steps to it. Have compassion, give yourself time. It's not a night and day thing where truly the gospel does kind of make it seem like, oh, as soon as I know better,
right,
I'll do better. No, that's just step one.
Yeah. No, I love the idea of installation, because I feel like a lot of us revert to factory settings, right? Where we're in a supercharged situation and it's really hard to, you know, implement this stuff. So it's good. You've given us hope and encouragement. So I love it. This is perfect. So everybody, please comment. Let us know what you think. I'm assuming we've had a lot of great dialogue in the chat about this, because this is a topic I think we can all relate to, either having been there or still going through it, or, you know, looking forward to resolving some of these issues with ourselves as we work through it. Like I said, life is long. So please like and subscribe to Mormonish Podcast. And if you'd like to be made aware of when new episodes come out, you can hit that notification bell. Please, everybody, go over to Kendel's sites that we've talked about, because there's so much more good stuff that we couldn't possibly cover unless we talk for hours and hours and hours, which, you know, we already have. So if you'd like to help financially support the podcast, you can always make a donation. We have a link in our show notes to Donor Box. We are a nonprofit, and we appreciate everybody that does so much. It means so much to us and allows us to continue to have fabulous guests like Kendel on the show. We also have links to our Mormonish merch store. You can check that out too. Links in the show notes. And again, thank you, Kendel. I'm sad Landon didn't get to hear this, but we'll make sure that he watches it after the fact, because, you know, he also needs some help with boundaries. I don't think he's a people pleaser like we are, but, you know, when you're dealing with family and dynamics and things like that, there's always something to be learned from this, and your whole change mindset when you're on the other side of a high demand, high control religion. I think that's the point. So thank you, Kendel. Yeah, we will have you on again. No question. You're one of our favorite recurring guests. So bye, everybody. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for joining us for another episode of Mormonish. We really appreciate our listeners and would love to hear from you if you have a story you'd like to share. You can email us at mormonishpodcast@gmail.com. You can also find us on Facebook, Instagram, and on our website, mormonishpodcast.org. And don't forget to look for us on YouTube and like and subscribe. Keep joyful, everybody.